I try to overcome this temporary software bug. It's not working. Okay, so we've got you. Let me add Kevin here. And we'll be back live in just a moment.
Okay.
We've got Kevin coming online. We've got Field with us right now. Kevin, are you there? Kevin, can you hear me?
Okay, looks like I got you guys.
Great. All right. So there we go.
Good morning, Field. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you two?
Good, good, thanks.
I am well. I'm delighted to have you both with me here. And we are live, gentlemen. This is a very important show. I'm so pleased that both of you have decided to come together. I know that some people had seen last week there was a little bit of a misunderstanding, and I like to dispel these misunderstandings. This purpose of this meeting is to bring together two gentlemen who I respect tremendously. I've met both of you personally, and I think you are both true patriots fighting evil in our government, and it's important to me that we meet and discuss any potential misunderstandings, because I think there's so much that we could all do to work together. And the primary thing I wanted to discuss with you guys was this senior executive service, because this is something that I knew nothing about before my first conversation with Field. And of course, Kevin, you've told me, and Robin Gritz has also told me, that in your experience, the senior executive service is merely a pay grade, and you've both worked with people in that department that you respect. So I don't, as some people who try to drive a wedge between all of us, I don't jump to the conclusion that one or the other person is necessarily intentionally trying to deceive. Right away, when I have two people who I like and trust and respect who have directly opposing views, I want to understand what is it that one or both or all of us might not be understanding. So I want to open this discussion, and of course it's not my intention for this to be an argument, but rather an open dialogue where we can debate what we disagree about and come together on what we agree upon. And I was never in the debate club or anything like that, so I'm not really aware of a formal format. Which of you guys would like to begin and start the conversation off?
Yeah, Jason, Jason, if I may start,
Please.
You and I talked quite a bit, and obviously our goal is to make sure we keep the truth movement and the alt media movement together, because there's a lot of infighting going back and forth and back and forth, and all that does is hurt all of our goal to expose the shadow government and some of these other things that are pretty dark and pretty wicked. So I think this is really, really good that you're doing this. And secondly, I put out a tweet, what has it been, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very, very protective of my followers. And we've got them all walks of life, and military, et cetera. So I try to double and triple vet everybody that I have on. And I didn't know Field at the time. I've watched some of his stuff since then. So I popped out a tweet saying, well, I can't support Field right now, and which was just based on the fact that I didn't know him, couldn't vet him yet. But what I should have done is come back with a tweet after that, just trying to explain that further. I don't know Field. I can't support him because I've never met him, don't know his stuff. So I own that. And I just want you guys both to know I own that. I've since put out a tweet saying, since you and I have talked and I've watched some of Field's stuff, I certainly do support him now. So I own that. I put out a tweet stating that, I think last week. And so Field, my apologies to you for not following that up with clarification. And I'm just glad we're all on together today.
Likewise. Well, we don't have sound on you there, Field. Can't hear you.
Oh, Fabio's not talking. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can hear you.
I think this has been a tempest in a teapot, and I will claim ignorance of Kevin Shipp and his history. But I never was offended by anything he tweeted. And I'm not offended now, and there's no need for forgiveness or apologies or admissions. I believe that all three of us are working towards the same goal. We may be coming from different azimuths.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you both agreed with that, because there's nobody that does what I do. And
Right.
that's not a boastful statement. But when I started attacking the people I attack, fortunately for me, I did it in a way when anybody that was charged or in a position where they need to investigate statements made by me or by Abel Danger, which doesn't really exist. But if it does exist, it's me and David Hawkins. But it doesn't exist. It's like a church. Wherever two or three are gathered, well, it exists. Otherwise, there is no address. There's no staffing document. There's no payroll. And so as far as Kevin Shipp's tweets, I'm not sure I even saw them, but I would say it's a tempest in a teapot. And I think that there's people who follow me and they wrongfully judge me to be incapable of speaking for myself or defending myself, but there's nothing to defend. There's no foul. There's no ill intent. And so I will say this, Jason, I know you come to expect unusual statements from me. Have you noticed that Kevin and I have very similar facial hair? Well,
I mean,
Hey, birds of a feather, you know?
right.
what in the world does that mean? Well, it means whatever people hearing it think it means. It means absolutely nothing. And such is the case with that tweet. I never saw it. It never offended me. And there's nothing Kevin or you, Jason, could do to offend me, because I've just made myself inoffendable. There's nothing positive about an offense, and therefore I never take an offense.
Well, that's really, you're a gentleman, Field. Yeah, you know, when I put the tweet out, that wasn't the intent at all, so much so that I just put it out and say, look, I can't support this. I don't know these people yet. And it was Jason who said, oh my gosh, that tweet has caused a firestorm. And I said, well, what tweet? No, the tweet about Field. And I'm like, well, that's not what I was saying. And he said, well, that, you know, with Twitter, that's the problem with Twitter, man. You got to be so careful with every single word. You can't just bang one out on the run, you know.
Yes.
So I went back and I looked at it and I said, well, you know, I mean, that wasn't the intent, but let me clarify that. So it wasn't a aspersion on you, Field, at all, or Abel Danger for that matter. I don't know a whole lot about Abel Danger, but it just goes to show you, you know, with tweets, you got to be real careful about the wording. And I've since done that. I've come out with one where I explained, I think, hopefully well enough. So this is a Twitter. I don't know what else. What other word to use? Twitter brain fart, maybe. Anyway, but you know, thank God, I'm glad we all came together, because this. I hope, Jason, and you're the lead on this, and kudos to you. I hope this is an example of how to take the truth movement and keep it unified and put it together, and quit all these people taking things offensively, incorrectly, wrong, right, attacking each other. Just put a stop to that, and perhaps the three of us can be example to the rest of the truth movement that, hey man, we got to stick together because we're fighting a monster.
Yes, I agree. And I'm so thankful to both of you for agreeing to come together. And I'm glad we were able to talk, because, Kevin, as you point out, so often a text or a tweet can be easily misconstrued. I think also there's a lot about Abel Danger that Kevin may not know, a lot about Kevin that Field may not know. And the internet is definitely ripe, fertile ground for jumping to conclusions and the wrong piece of information spreading around. I know that David and Field have worked very hard to make Abel Danger this cloud-centric crime solution environment, and there are a lot of people who participate much in the same way that I have begun to set up Crowdsource the Truth. People from the community at large come forward with information, and one of the biggest challenges that I face is being able to discern who is coming at me with factual, truthful information and coming from a place of integrity versus those who would seek to deceive. And, you know, there are a lot of people involved with Crowdsource the Truth. There are a lot of people involved with Abel Danger. So there are times that people out there in the viewing public might see something associated with Crowdsource the Truth or see something associated with Able Danger, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that is what was said by myself or by Field or by David, or in Kevin's case, there's all kinds of areas for misunderstanding. So with that all being said, let's dive into this subject of the senior executive service, because again, I knew nothing about this until Field told me about it, and Field and David had given us extensive background on Field's sister, Christine Marcy, who by all measures seems to be involved in a number of absurdly nefarious activities. And it's difficult sometimes to find the links to these things on the internet, because obviously if this is a woman who, as Field and David have, in my view, very clearly represented, is involved at such high levels in the government, it's no big deal to delete some item from a web page or cover the tracks in certain ways. And one of the things that has attracted me to Field and to David is that, in a similar sense to other guests that I've had on, like let's say Quinn Michaels, for example, just when you don't know these guys, they come out with statements that on the surface seem so outrageous that they're almost impossible to believe. But when you start to go to the documented evidence, the patents and the things that David and Field have shown us that indicate that what they're saying seems to be irrefutable, I'm drawn to that. So I want to understand, Field, can you lay out for us your perception of SES and why you feel it's this dangerous subversive element within the government? And then I'd like Kevin to answer and let us know, because I can't really speak intelligently to this topic at all. I have no experience in it.
My sister, I believe, and I always like to state I like to disambiguate. How's that for a nice snobby word? I like to disambiguate facts from opinions. But I know my sister, there's no one on earth that's closer to her genetically, DNA-wise, and historically than me. Our parents are deceased, and I can claim right now with 100% certainty that they were both very embarrassed of her and her enterprises. But in 1978, it is my belief, and I'm going to defer. In fact, Kevin, if you have a question, raise it immediately. Please interrupt me, because you come from a background where you may well be able to correct me with authority, and I seek that. But
and I always say I'm a recovering CIA officer, so I'm still recovering. So, but that's good. Appreciate that.
Well, I've got to send you both a picture. In fact, Jason, write this down mentally.
Yes.
There's so many people that have so many wrong or incorrect or a little bit not accurate feelings about things like the CIA, the FBI. I've spoofed both of those organizations because, and I've got a picture to prove it. I've got a picture of me taken at the, you can call it GRU or KGB, but in Kazakhstan, which is supposed to be maybe a key player in the New World Order in years to come. I was sitting at the favorite watering hole in Kazakhstan, directly across the street. And by the way, Kazakhstan's a big country, but in Astana, which is the capital of Kazakhstan. I was directly across the street from KGB, GRU, call it what you will. I find a lot of these organizations, whether intentionally or for good reason or to obfuscate, that's two really snobby words I've used. I think I've outdone myself. Yeah, I can't even pronounce obfuscate, but I had a picture taken because I've got an unusual sense of humor, but I also have a love for the United States of America, and I have a love for global commoners. I don't differentiate. I care no more about some 9-year-old boy in inner city New York than I do for a 9-year-old girl in Astana, Kazakhstan. And so once I started figuring out what my sister had been involved in and with whom, then I decided to try to expose this in a manner that would get the information out without getting me killed. I have a, you know, it doesn't matter where I went to college, Kevin, or you, or Jason, but I happened to go to college at Annapolis, which when I applied there and I attended there, I thought it was a good institution. I may or may not feel that way anymore. And that's how I feel about my sister. When I grew up with my sister, I thought she was a very intelligent, very capable, very aggressive pursuer of good things. Well, sewer would be the key two syllables.
She put the sewer in pursuer.
Yeah, well, she's been involved in a sewer of rats since no later than 1969. And I say that, Kevin, because I'm sure you're a critical listener. I say 1969 because that's when she took her first job in the bureaucracy. And that first job was Office of Economic Opportunity, where she worked under, that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Where she worked under Dick Cheney and Frank Carlucci and Donald Rumsfeld.
No, that's not good. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Who knows why she was there? But she may have been, well, let me just ask Kevin a question. Would I be correct in saying that the East-West Center at the University of Hawaii has been occasionally linked to the CIA? Would that be true or false or not?
Well, thanks, Field. I spend most of my time trying to stay out of jail because they've been gunning for me for 15 years. So I can't say it is and I can't say it was, but boy, would I love to. Anyway, I got to be careful. So good question, though.
I believe my sister was recruited at the East-West Center in 1966 or early 1967. And just so we can more understand my sister, she got out of high school 1 year early. She got out of college 1 year early. She's very intelligent. She's very aggressive, but she had an insatiable need to be somebody. Sometimes it's safer being a nobody. But anyway, she wanted to be somebody. So the somebody she became, I believe that process started when she was taken out of George Washington University in Washington, D.C. She wanted to go to Georgetown, but she didn't have whatever was necessary to get in. She did get in later. And by the way, Kevin, if you notice that I go from A to B to C to Z, back to P, and then to Q, that's just the way I think, and it's the way I speak. But my sister did not want to leave Washington. There was something in Washington, and I think it's called power, that she really had an appetite for. And my parents saw some things in her behavior, and I'm not talking about the fact that she's a lesbian, which she is, but that doesn't matter. Not to me. There's lesbians that live all around me. I live in a very liberal part of Wisconsin, and I get along fine with lesbians. I draw the line when the lesbians are trying to attack my country or people that do things I do, like airline pilots on 9/11. So now, my sister and I...
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead, Jason.
I believe we're viewing the East-West Center, the John Burns Hall. Is that part of the East-West Center?
I have no idea, and I don't see what you see. I can see you and Kevin.
Right.
And that's...
Let me get us to a screen share here so that you guys can see what we're looking at, because this is interesting. The East-West Center, it's associated with Barack Obama as well, isn't it?
Sure, and guess who his grandmother was?
Tell me.
Her name was, I think it was Toot Dunham. She had a nickname that was really cute. It might have been Toot, but...
Oh, Turdy or something like that? David was...
Yeah, but anyway, the point is, everything I'm involved in, it seems, and none of this, by the way, Kevin, I don't have a background in intelligence. I don't have a background in wanting to be shot errantly by the FBI or a postal worker, but I do have a great love of the truth, and I seek personally to be as truthful without being, I don't want excuse me for burping. I don't want diarrhea of the mouth or the mouse, M-O-U-S-E. But I find a lot of threads here that lead to the same conclusion. Barack Obama, when he went to my high school, Punahou, which is a prestigious snob school in Honolulu, and it alternates with a school in Massachusetts as being the best, most academically accredited or credentialed high school in the country. And Punahou School is a place I never should have gotten into, but neither should he. But when I got into Punahou in 1966 to graduate in 67, I was registered as Field McConnell, U.S. citizen Christian. And I was not a Christian then, and I didn't even know what a Christian was then, but they had to put something on my file. So they put down, actually what they put, I think, was on my military dog tags later. It said Protestant, but you know, that infers Christian. It doesn't matter. My sister hated being in Hawaii. My parents, who paid for her college, got her out of Washington because they saw something bad happening with her. So she came out to Hawaii because she had no option and got into the University of Hawaii, where I believe she was recruited by Barack Obama's alleged grandmother, who is Stanley Ann Dunham's mother. And I think her real name was Madeline Dunham, but I believe her nickname was Toots or something like that. Well, I have a cousin who is absolutely certain that as early as the academic year we're talking about, 66, 67, my sister was already a practicing lesbian. And I believe that she may well, and first of all, this cannot be proven wrong. And Kevin, I think you're going to find a trend here that oftentimes the things that I say that seem earth-shattering cannot be proven wrong. For instance, Barack Obama, who doesn't exist, when he went to my high school, he was registered as Barry Soetoro, Soetoro, Indonesian Muslim. Does that matter to me? Nope, I don't care. But I do think that we citizens, and that's a bad word too, but the people that were born in the U.S. or have emigrated here legally that love the U.S., I think we are entitled to truthful leadership. And the crap we've seen coming out of Washington for the last 50 years is anything but truthful. And there's a picture of Madeline, and I do think she had a nickname, Toots or something, but it's also true, and I want to be corrected immediately by Kevin or Jason if I misspeak, but days before Obama was elected, I'll take a look at the date right there, November 2nd of 2008. She died, and she needed to die because she's one of the people who knows who he really is. And by the way, a strange coincidence, and I didn't do this on purpose, Kevin and Jason, but parked outside right now is my 1996 Cadillac hearse, which has Barry Soetoro, Punahou 79, in both center windows, and on the front and back license plate, just to demonstrate that I don't hate Republicans or Democrats or white people or non-white people. I just hate people that are evil. The license plates, which are legit, are SABOW3, and SABOW was James E. Sabo, a Marine aviator who I served alongside at El Toro Marine Corps Air Station in the 70s, and he was murdered under the orders of a former president of the United States. And of course, I don't want to sound reckless or like I have a death wish. No, actually it's Sabo, S-A-B-O-W. So therefore, I won't name the guy who ordered him to be dead, but I'll tell you that that person who ordered the murder of Sabo today sits in a wheelchair. And I have no fear and I have no favor. I do like to expose as aggressively as I can these crimes, which are not just crimes against United States people. These crimes that I pursue are crimes against humanity. And that brings us back to the senior executive service, I believe. My sister was asked by George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter in 1978, they asked her to create something called the Senior Executive Service. And here's where I need to turn it over to Kevin, because I will just make a real quick bullet statement. I believe, and I have good reason to believe this, whether I'm right or wrong, I believe my sister was conscripted by the CIA to create what effectively has been a large part of the shadow government. And I don't hold any contempt for people that are members of the SES, because they would not know what I believe to be true, the purpose of it. But it was to create a group where overnight, when my sister put it into operation in 1979, overnight, every single bureaucracy in the United States elected government was supplanted or obstructed by sticking somebody with absolutely, that was going to be an incorrect statement, let me back out of that, with no great expertise. I'll just pick on one bureaucracy, the Defense Department. Overnight, 1979, somebody was stuck up at the top of the Defense Department, and that somebody would have been a member of the Senior Executive Service. I find that any organization can be obstructed or misguided if you got the top person, whether they're a male, female, whether they're white, black, yellow, red, brown. None of those things matter, but all of those things have been used to defend people knowingly committing treason against the United States of America. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin here real quick, but I believe there's more than 8,000 members of the SES, and I believe very few of them would share my opinion of why they were brought into existence. But keep in mind, none of those members of the SES are the sibling and the only sibling of Christine Marcy, who I believe is the second most evil. This is a belief, not a fact, but it has never been disputed. I believe she's the second most evil person in the United States of America, and her purpose has been to destroy America. And that was attempted on 9/11 in what was designed to be a top-off, TOPOFF exercise. And I believe that the events of Malaysia 370 and Malaysia 17 have been done by the same group of people with the same purpose. And if the United States of America is going to be destroyed, then I don't want to be here. Is that clear enough, Jason?
It is, Field. Thank you for all of that. Kevin, what can you say about what Field has just told us?
Yeah. First of all, I agree with him. I think the Malaysian airline was taken over remotely, and I think the evidence is real clear that that happened if you follow the flight path and other things. So I think that did happen, yes. And in terms of the origin of the SES, I can't speak to that at all. Obviously, that's something none of us really knew about, so that could very well be the case. I can also say that based on my work inside the agency, SES members are deployed to several different other agencies to run programs for those agencies. So they are spread out, outside the CIA into other organizations. Field is correct about that. I can only say this, and I can only say what I know. I don't know the origins that Field is talking about, but it fits the mold of what the CIA does and how they operate, going all the way back to Barry's education in Hawaii. So that all fits the operational signature of an asset of the agency. I mean, you can just almost smell it if you've worked inside that capacity. So the Senior Executive Service, I worked under several members of that, and I would think it entirely possible that they didn't know about the origin of their own organization. That being said, the SES members that I worked under, there were 3 of them that were very patriotic, solid. Matter of fact, that's a little rare in the CIA to find somebody who really is a non-narcissistic professional. It's rare. And the bosses that I had that were promoted from GS-15, when you reach GS-15 in the CIA specifically, you can't go any higher than that. And if you show exemplary performance, then you're promoted up to the next and final level, and that's SES. So I had some really good bosses. I can count the number of good bosses I had on one hand, but I did have some good ones, and they they did some in one case, pretty heroic stuff, and were promoted into the SES because of exceptional performance. So in our encapsulated world in the CIA, SES members were members that had done something very exceptional. In one case, saved a bunch of lives when a certain facility was being taken over. Grabbed a gun and literally defended a group of armed Muslims trying to take the place over. Was rewarded the Intelligence Star. He was quite a hero. Another SES member, and I think that's a really good point, that the SES members themselves probably, and if it's that nefarious and dark, it's probably intentional that they don't know about the origin of their service, or they would have gotten out. In any event, when I stumbled across the vulnerability in the CIA, where foreign agents could go into embassies and literally identify our cover agents, and possibly lead them to assassination and everybody that they were connected with. When I first did that study and presented the proof, the CIA senior manager involved called me on the secure line, threatened me, and ordered me to drop it immediately, using the same old term, "It's above your pay grade." So I hung up the phone, and this guy he wasn't an SES member, which I need to make clear, the bad guy. Subsequently, 4 of my memos were destroyed, and they told me the people involved, they were lost. Then the investigation was deleted from the internal CIA server, and we went on with kind of my targeting from there. But eventually, I get a phone call from an SES member who used to be a GS-15 that I worked for, telling me that, hey, your study was sent over to us here. He was with Department of State IG senior investigators at the time. I can't say his name, obviously, but he said, we looked at your investigation and we think that you may be onto something here. Keep this to yourself. Don't let these agency managers who've been blocking this know. Come on over to Main State if you can. I said, sure, sir, I'll be there. So I went over to the upper floor of Main State, and they sat down and they had my report. They'd read the whole thing, thank goodness, and they said, look, this could be potentially serious. We're going to go out internationally, and we're going to do a study and see if we can be penetrated like that. And I said, thank you, sir. Over to you, man, because I'm risking my entire career here. 3 months later, I get a call on the secure line, and it's this guy, fellow Jim. He goes, you need to come over to Main State immediately up to the IG office. Yes, sir, I'll be there. Went up there, and they said, it's not as bad as you thought. It's worse. That a foreign agent could go into the computer system in the embassy and identify your cover personnel, which is serious. He said, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to bring the CIA into that meeting. Would you be willing to come? And I said, yes, sir. So it was about probably 3 days later, I got a phone call, Kev, meeting set for Friday, 12 o'clock. Please report to IG office. So I went over there, walked into a conference room, and sitting there was this fellow Jim, 2 senior IG members, and at the other end of the table was the senior CI officer that had covered this up. I had been threatened, deleted all the files from the server, and on it went, deleted my hard copies. And the Department of State IG, through Jim, who was an SES member, publicly rebuked the CIA for putting the lives of its agents at risk for over 10 years. They should be ashamed of themselves, and a study was going out to the entire intelligence community, rebuking the CIA in writing. That went out to all of the intelligence outlets, and the CIA was publicly embarrassed. And of course, my story goes later than that in terms of being targeted. So, it's. I think, Field, you and I seem to have just 2 kind of different views of the same thing. I can't address the things you said, although having worked for several CIA managers that were power hungry and narcissistic, like your sister, that runs in the upper management of the CIA like blood through veins. I mean, that's the kind of personality that is attracted to be the head of CIA operational programs. Some of them are just as dark and evil as you can imagine. The lower levels, some really great patriotic CIA employees, but when you get to the top, I worked under some of they were sociopathic at best. So I could see your sister fitting right into that category of individuals in the CIA. So to answer your question, let's see, two of my best managers had been promoted from GS-15 up to SES as just an increase in pay grade. And then once they reach that level, they are assisting other agencies. So I can say that. I can't address its origin at all. I simply don't know. And I suspect most SES members don't know either. We just saw it as a promotional pay grade up to the highest level you can go because of some sort of meritorious service.
Well, Kevin, you've just hit on the crux of what my instincts told me. Because again, as I said, I've met both of you guys, and I know in my mind, you both seem like two individuals of the utmost integrity with the best intentions, and I could not imagine, as some troll-like individuals who have been persistently hounding each of us would say, I could not imagine that one or the other of you was intentionally lying to me. I knew there had to be some sort of misunderstanding. And Kevin, the first thing that occurred to me was, as you've just said, is it possible that just the top of the SES is the problem and the people in it don't get it? And that in a similar fashion to, I mean, look, when you joined the CIA, you didn't do that because you thought it was a narcissistic and evil, corrupt organization. You had a good view of the CIA, but when you got in there and saw some of the people that were pulling the strings of power, you realized there was a serious problem. So as this disagreement sort of unfolded online, I began to think, well, maybe it's possible that Kevin was interfacing with people within the SES who don't know about the aspects of corruption there, and maybe they're both correct. So it seems like that's what we're getting to right now, Field, don't you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't think Kevin and I ever disagreed on anything. And if people want to read that into a tweet, well, that's their problem, not mine or Kevin's. And I don't want to sound rude, Kevin, but really I know very little about you. But I don't have to know anything about anybody to do what I do. But when I find something troubling about someone, then I try to figure out if that person is intentionally doing something to harm the United States. And I just want to say right now, so you both, and more importantly, Jason's listeners hear this, but on the 29th of July of 2015, I sent a personal email to Donald Trump, who was then a candidate, and Ben Carson, who was then a candidate, and to General Joseph Dunford, who was then the Commandant of the Marine Corps, unless he had just recently become the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I don't recall what position Dunford held on the day I sent these three gentlemen a letter. The date of the letter was 29 July 15, and I said to candidate Trump and candidate Carson that I think the United States of America would be well served by either of you getting to take leadership of this ship of fools that have been trying to destroy us from the inside out. And I said, in the spirit of cooperation, I just want to state that if either of you gentlemen succeed in becoming the president, POTUS 45, and you decide to try to find out where the treason exists, the central person to take a look at is my sister, Christine Marcy. Now, I'm not asking Kevin to say yes, no, or maybe, and the same for you, Jason. So I'll just put this out there as a question to the people. The people listening to this live show or the recorded version later can ask themselves this question. Do you think Donald Trump and General Dunford can remember my letter of 29 July 2015? And I will answer that question according to the best of my understanding. I believe both of them remember it very, very well. And I think that my sister will be getting one of the first invitations for a vacation at Guantanamo Bay if the sealed indictments that we've been led to believe exist, if they start opening those seals and sharing the indictments with the public, I would be two things. I'd be stunned not to see my sister in the first 20, and I'd be very disappointed and very sad for this country if General Dunford and Donald Trump don't take my sister off the street. back, I guess it was 30 plus years ago, when there was a Unabomber in Chicago, uh, members of that guy's own family, and that guy is allegedly, if you believe law enforcement and the federal government, is allegedly Ted Kaczynski, and he was incarcerated based on the exposure of his family. Well, I'd like to see a little bit tit for tat. I'm exposing my sister, and by the way, Kevin probably would not know this, he may. Jason, you may not know it, but my sister's history has been scrubbed, and only last week have I ever seen my sister's name in a legitimate article exposing the swamp creatures that are trying, and I think I know they're failing, and I believe they're going to have a terminal failure. But my sister has just been named finally in a list of bad people, and my question is, what took these people so long, and who's protecting my sister? That's an open question. I don't know who's protecting her, but some people, more than one, have told me that the CIA can make people disappear, and I don't mean dead. They can make people not appear to have a history, but I think finally her history's coming out, and if it is in fact coming out, I hope, I believe, and I pray that General Dunford and President Trump are very well informed of her, my sister Christine Marcy, and they will take appropriate action. How's that, Jason?
That's very interesting, Field. Where can we find that mention of her?
You mean the letter?
Yeah.
Oh, well, no. Oh, yes, I understand. Sorry. I do a radio show Monday and Thursday, and I'm going to write my note right now. If you can see me, you'll see I just reached for my whatever this thing's called, list of chores, and I will send you the radio show ad for Monday, and that list was in there. Now, you just put up Able Danger. That's not where, well, I don't know. It could be there. I haven't seen it there. But the radio show ad itself for Monday, which was the 13th, in there is the article that talks about my sister being one of the key players, and it lists all the key players. But this is the first time I've ever seen my sister's name in print. So some very powerful organization has been trying to protect her.
But Field, haven't we seen the Washington Post article of many years ago about the Mendenhall baby?
Yes, and the lady who wrote that's dead. No, I don't believe she's dead because of what she wrote. But correct me if I misspeak here, Jason. It was suggested that my sister's second pregnancy was the result of a rear aspect attack by one of the Soames brothers, and the Soames, S-O-A-M-E-S brothers, Nicholas and Rupert, are the grandsons of Winston Churchill. And notice in this article by Judy Mann, she spells my sister's name wrong. It's Marcy, M-A-R-C.
Actually, Field, I saw an original printing of this from the print edition of Washington Post, and it was correct. It's only this internet version that has the typo.
Well, that goes back to what I just asked, and I was asking both of you. Notice they also spell child wrong. They spell child chili with a load. I mean, who believes all this garbage when they make all these fundamental mistakes? But some organization has been trying to protect my sister, and until somebody tells me otherwise, and I believe them, I don't care what the organization is, but I am confident that George H.W. Bush is at the top of that organization, either manipulating it from a lateral displacement, or maybe historically he ran that organization. But everywhere I look for my sister, I see really bad people, and so many of them in the United States of America have gone through Georgetown University, as did my sister. And I think Kevin doesn't know this, so I'll just say that on the 21st of August of 2014, I was a juror, and and this is in a Wisconsin court. I've got a call that I'm going to blow off here, as I do most. Yeah, I very seldom answer my phone. I answer when you call, Jason, and you know that. But
I appreciate that.
well, you're welcome. Some people are worth talking to. Some people are worth getting rid of. But 21st of August of 2014, right before the judge in a pedophile, and I don't know if pedophile is the right word, because the alleged victim was a 15-year-old girl who was abused by her stepfather. So that wouldn't be pedophilia, it'd be something else. Incest, no, that wouldn't be right either, but it didn't matter what it was. The judge looked at the 12 of us in the box and said, do any of you 12 jurors have a personal relationship with pedophilia? And I raised my hand. And as both of you know, these judges are not that smart. They're like B-scale actors. If you can't get a job in Hollywood, you can get a job in the Department of Justice as long as you can follow the script. Well, he looked down at his cheat sheet, just like I have a cheat sheet right here. And he saw that the guy sitting on the front row in the left end was named McConnell. So he looked at me as if he really cared, which he didn't. And he said, Mr. McConnell, are you telling me that you have a personal history of pedophilia? And I said, yes, Judge. I didn't say Your Honor because he's a dishonorable person in my judgment, or my view. I said, yes, Judge. My sister, Christine Marcy, and Hillary Clinton run the largest international net-centric pedophile fulfillment network in the world. And I'm not, this is really an indictment on the entire Department of Justice. This judge, sitting up there in his black robe, did this. He put his hands over his ears. He said, too much information, you're excused. Well, the court reporter should have put that in the file. And if it's not in the file, there's plenty of witnesses that were still in the courtroom when I said that could be called upon to say, did Field McConnell really say this? And if so, why is it not in the file? So what I'm suggesting there is when I exposed Hillary Clinton and my sister for being at the management level of both Pizzagate and Pedogate. Pizzagate is the domestic, Pedogate is the international. The Department of Justice didn't want to hear it. Well, of course not, because the Department of Justice is a private corporation, and the ABA, the American Bar Association, is a private corporation, and the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, is a private corporation, and they're all related to Northern Trust, which is a multinational corporation, and all of this stuff leads directly to the evil people within the UK government. And just like our government, we, the people of both, and by the way, Kevin, you don't know this perhaps, but my wife is a Brit. She's a British citizen. Mm-hmm. And she and I agree completely that both of our governments are evil, but they're controlled by a super minority of people that use pedophilia as the glue that allows all these other bit players to continue to not expose the evil from within. And I've heard Kevin say several times that there's things he cannot say, and I fully understand that. But see, I don't work for anybody, and Jason knows that that's a little bit of an incomplete statement. I do work 18 hours a day for God and also for the global commoners. Yes, I'm very happy that I'm a U.S. citizen. And I very, very much believe that the United States is supposed to be a special country, but we're not operating in that mold historically. And when I say historically, I mean from the 30th of March of 1981 until the 20th of January of 2017. It is my bold statement, and if this is the last statement I make before I kick the bucket, I'd be very happy. I believe from the 30th of March of 1981 until the 20th of January of 2017, the United States government was acting in an evil manner because it was being controlled by an extremely evil human. Over to you, Jason.
Feel that's a lot of information, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. When you say that you believe that Christine Marcy is being protected, the reason some of these incredibly obvious typos exist in this easily searchable internet version is very likely to prevent people from finding her and searching for the relevant terms that might, in fact, lead back to credible information that Nicholas Soames, who I must say does bear a resemblance to your niece, might have
you
in
said
fact...
Denise. You mean Jessica?
Your niece, yes, Christine's...
Excuse me, my wife is Denise.
Not
and
Denise,
you're right.
your
Yes,
niece.
Nicholas
Yes.
does look like Jessica Marcy.
Your sister's daughter, yes, your niece.
Yes, right.
And so it's an amazing story. And this is another one of those things that you and David first brought to my attention that on the surface seems ridiculous. This Mendenhall baby idea and all of this stuff. But again, when you start to dig into the facts and evidence, it's hard to argue with some of this stuff. Certainly covering tracks and changing data on the internet is not the most extensive cover-up the CIA would go to. Kevin, you've dealt quite a bit with digital footprints being covered or masked in your investigations with the CIA. What do you think about these statements?
Well, I'll tell you one thing for sure. Truth is stranger than fiction. And Christine Marcy's, and I've gone and searched all over the place for her, and where you can find just about any government official or leader in the CIA, and she's nowhere. The CIA is dark and nefarious at the upper levels, and you can be sure someone like that would be protected, kept out of public view, and especially involved in that sort of thing. She'd be given a cover, and if that was violated by anyone, they could be arrested for the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. So they insulate people, and it's kind of a upper level blackmail operation where once you get in there and you get to that level, first of all, they own you. You sign a secrecy oath and you violate that, you can go to prison, lose your job, other things. But second of all, when you get to that level, the people that I work under are so narcissistic and power hungry. That is the main thing that drives them more than anything else. And if Christine Marcy is like that, she fits the personality of the senior CIA officers I worked for. And also, you know, as I have given a recent speech, that Hillary Rodham Clinton is directly connected into the shadow government and the CIA. And she was given a CIA clearance when she was First Lady, which is illegal. She's been a part of the shadow government since then. She has a tremendous, in my view, based on my research, a huge blackmail network, both outside the shadow government and its inside. The woman has incredible power with what I call the Clinton crime syndicate. So for Christine Marcy being joined to her, they're both obviously of the lesbian persuasion. They're both in government. You'd think at one point they would meet up and it would fit that profile. So none of this surprises me. It all fits the operational covers that I've seen and some of the dark operations that I have seen the CIA do. All of this MO fits right in there.
This is powerful. This is what I had hoped we would get to, guys. So, I mean, again, we've got the most powerful organization in the world trying to suppress this information. But when people with individual bits of information can come together and speak like this, we really start to see it's like a puzzle that we only have a couple of pieces to. And I'm so pleased that we were able to come together and discuss this. Now, it brings me to another individual who has been sort of pecking at both of you guys and me, possibly indirectly, which, again, he may just be confused, but I'm talking, of course, about this individual who very curiously approached Jack Prosobic out of essentially nowhere on the streets of Warsaw, and since that day has been very persistent in trying to convince initially me, Field, that he called me and said that you and David are deliberately lying to me, which I found very difficult to believe. And I also just found his approach to be totally inappropriate. I'm talking about Warsaw Kevin, and I don't want to put too much attention on this, but I do think it's important that people watching understand that there are these really deliberate disinformation campaigns, and they try to do this. They try to convince me that I shouldn't be talking to Field or David. They try to convince Kevin that he shouldn't be talking to Field. They want to prevent what we're doing right now. And I can only speculate as to why someone might do that, but I like to bring attention to it because it just seems so conspicuous to me that someone would just sort of come out of nowhere and appear on a broadcast with our friend Jack in the middle of Warsaw and then just troll. What do we think about this behavior?
Yeah, Jason, if I may, that guy was pestering me for, well, he still is trying to pester me until I deleted him. I can tell you this with certainty that Warsaw is an espionage a hornet's nest. The SVR, the Russians, and every other service, there's recruiting, there's assets, there's people disappearing. Warsaw has always been an espionage hub. So to meet in Warsaw and have this guy, Kevin, come out of Warsaw is pretty bizarre. And I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because this needs to be addressed publicly. First, he started asparaging you. Then he started disparaging Field. Then he started disparaging me, saying that I was an idiot and a moron if I didn't expose this. And finally, I wrote him back and I said, Bud, I'm deleting you. What you're saying is baloney. I didn't get into the fact that I thought he could be an agent, an asset, which I think he is. But that's what he was doing. He was trolling all three of us to try to split us up out of Warsaw, Poland. 2 + 2 = 4. I've seen so much of this stuff, it bears all the resemblance of an operation.
And to that, I want to point out this individual. I don't know if you guys can see this video on the screen share, but we've got this guy who just sort of, I didn't even notice this until the other night, and this video is over a year old. This guy in the middle, he showed up in the middle of this conversation between Jack and Kevin, and he's throwing up this hand signal, which a lot of people have told me is like a 666, some sort of Luciferian, occult kind of masonry sort of thing. He's wearing a t-shirt with pyramids all over it. He's also speaking in English. How many English-speaking tourists are just rolling around in the middle of Warsaw when Jack Prosovic is doing live streams? I just found the whole thing totally bizarre, and I don't have any information on Jack Prosovic other than I've met the guy a few times and he seems nice to me. I just found it so strange that he's been tweeting about Peter Smith in support of what appears to me to be a Robert Mueller-driven narrative that this guy who just so happens to be dead, Peter W. Smith, is one of the main players in this Russia collusion investigation that by all measures seems to be crumbling around Mr. Mueller. It's just weird. Field, what do you think?
Yeah, I could spend a week talking to you two about this because I see so much progress being made. Yeah. But with Mueller, and I think for the rest of my relationship with both of you, if I ever say anything that seems unlikely to be true, interrupt me and call me on it, and I can prove it, I think, to be accurate. But with Mueller, once again, I'm going back to the internet. I use Google and the internet as my personal archive. Everything I do is public. But when it comes to Mueller, on the 14th of February of 2007, and he was the director then. His name was Robert Swan Mueller III, a Princeton graduate. Well, being a Princeton graduate is not something that will help you in the United States Marine Corps. And what I know about this fellow Mueller, when he was in the Marine Corps in the mid to late 60s in Vietnam, he was running a black market. So what does that tell us? Not much. But I can tell you from my experience in the Marine Corps that Marines over and above, I believe, now there's wonderful people in every branch, but a lot of people would say that Marines are mad dogs. Well, they are. They're mad dogs to become victorious in what they believe to be a legitimate pursuit. Now, are all the Marine Corps leaders integrity filled and informed both? I would say the answer has to be no. There must be people that have gotten, in fact, I know some right now. In fact, you know what? I'll mention the guy's name. He's still alive. The Commandant of the Marine Corps that signed off on the murder of James E. Sabo, S-A-B-O-W, his name was Al Gray. He's still alive. I hope he hears this. Al Gray, if someone orders you as the commandant to kill James E. Sabo, you better hope and pray that James B. Sabo's Phantom Wingman doesn't take you out one way or the other. How's that for a nice little soundbite, Jason?
It's a good one, Field, for sure. So Kevin,
well, this guy Al Gray,
yeah,
he took his orders from the president, and rather than name the guy in the wheelchair, I will just say that James Sabo was killed on the 22nd of January of 1991. So I don't have to mention George H.W. Bush's name, but let there be nobody in the world that thinks I'm reluctant to do so. These people that have killed friends of mine, peers of mine, which means to me it's not a social order. My relationship to James E. Sabo is known only to 3 people: myself, James Sabo's brother, and my wife, Denise. And anybody else that wants to know my relationships to James E. Sabo, get me in a courtroom under oath, as long as the courtroom is in the United States with no gold fringe flag, and I'll fry these guys' asses. There were 5 people that signed off on the murder of Sabo. Al Gray was number 2. Al Gray was sort of an anomaly. Back in 1991, you were not allowed to be a homosexual in the United States military. And if you were, then you should probably keep that a well-guarded secret. This guy was a raging queen, and you have to ask yourself, if you care about America and love America, and you can tell by my enhanced energy level that I care about it and I love it, and I'd rather die than let people like Al Gray murder honorable servants like James Sabo and not be exposed. I'll expose them all day long. In fact, while I'm on this little exposure exercise, here's the people that signed off on the murder of Colonel James Edward Sabo, United States Marine Corps: George H.W. Bush, Jeb Bush, Al Gray, former assistant commandant of the Marine Corps, surnamed Davis, a brigadier general at El Toro named Wayne T. Adams, and a colonel who was Sabo's next door neighbor. And there you see a picture of Colonel Sabo laying on the ground, and you can see pictures of his head being dissected. There it is. If you think that you're not going to get an energetic response from Marines when they say another Marine on a table having his head cut up for evidence that was never used to convict the people that murdered him. So let there be no ambiguity. Those people who signed off on the murder of James Sabo, George H.W. Bush, Jeb Bush, Commandant of the Marine Corps, Al Gray, Assistant Commandant, who was retired at the time, Davis, I'm not sure if he's still alive, it doesn't matter. Wayne T. Adams was a brigadier general at El Toro, and James Underwood was his next door neighbor that was a accessory to murder during, it's not after the fact, it's during the fact, because he coaxed James Sabo, Colonel Sabo, out of his residence on El Toro Marine Corps Air Station. And the reason why I call him Porky Underwood, because he was too fat to fly. One of the things Kevin doesn't know about me is I will go not only where people fear to tread, but I will humiliate these people in any manner I can to get under their skin, to draw them into a bad move, like a fatally bad move. And that's why I've never heard a peep out of my sister. I haven't heard a peep out of Al Gray. I haven't had a peep out of Davis, Wayne T. Adams, or Colonel Porky Underwood. These people are cowardly, treasonous murderers. And there are some things in this life worth dying over. And I would just summarize in my case, the one thing that I would gladly die for in 5 minutes is all of these 25 million victims annually of pedophilia, which is run by the same types of people that killed Colonel James Sabo. Is that a good soundbite for you, Jason?
It is, Field. Thank you. And if I might interject, I want to, as I believe you and I are gaining a good understanding of each other, I want to reinforce in viewers' minds that this is not at all a homophobic statement that Field is making. In 1991, for someone to be at the level of general in the Marines and to be hiding the secret of homosexuality, well, the revelation of that secret would surely end the man's career. So there was quite a bit at stake for him, and pointing out his homosexuality is done only to emphasize the circumstances that would have made somebody like this complicit with such a plan. So, gentlemen, this has been an amazing session, and I think we need to just wrap up here because I've got a show coming this afternoon with Charles Ortell. Of course, Charles has been closing in on the global, what he calls the unregulated globalist criminal syndicate. And I want to make sure each of you have a chance to just give us some closing statements for now. I certainly look forward to bringing you guys together in the future and for work that you'll do together separate from Crowdsource the Truth, however that may go. I'm so glad that we were able to straighten out this minor misunderstanding that, as the internet often does, was being spun into something much larger than it actually is. Kevin, is there anything you'd like to share with us before we wrap it up for today?
Well, yeah, I think a really important point we're all making is that there is a dark, monstrous group of people at the top of our government, especially in the secret annals of our government, that are essentially wicked to the core. There is an internationally connected pedophile ring that starts in the United Kingdom with some of the members in Parliament, has gone all the way into our Congress. You remember Dennis Hastert, third in charge, third in line for the presidency, was a serial pedophile, and on we go. So what we're dealing with, and I call it the shadow government, others call it the deep state. I think they're two different things. But we have now a tyrannical group of people in the upper levels of our government who are intent on taking control over the American people, connecting into this new global economic world order, along with the UK, who created it. And essentially circumvent our Constitution. This is very, very grave, and I'm glad people are hearing this because it's time to rise up, and I think we are, and expose this.
Absolutely. And I want to remind people that they can go to fortheloveoffreedom.net. That's Kevin's website. And you can purchase Kevin's book from the Company of Shadows. Kevin has very cleverly embedded a code within the book that allows you to view some of the material that the CIA illegally redacted from the book. Kevin was the first to inform me that it is against the law. It's in violation of a Ronald Reagan executive order for the CIA or the FBI to redact information that is not classified, because of course this allows them to continue to cover up their sinister activities. I also want to direct people to patreon.com /Kevin_Shipp, where you can see more videos from Kevin, including our newest series, The Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp, where I am getting nothing but incredibly positive responses to what people have basically called essentially a college-level course in the operation of the CIA. You are not going to see this kind of information anywhere except 4 on Patreon, when Kevin and I on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern are doing our only on Patreon show, The Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp. And you can sponsor Kevin on Patreon or Crowdsource the Truth at patreon.com/crowdsource the truth to watch that show. And Field, of course, you've got your radio shows with David Hawkins and the other members of Able Danger. We've got Mark, of course, Braveheart. Is it Pastor Braveheart?
Yes, he is the pastor.
He's joining you on there, and he's an excellent guy. I had the pleasure of meeting him there in Plum City for the plunge. People were super excited, Field, to go inside your garage and see some of the amazing automobiles that you have there, including Tillman's Ghost, dedicated to the memory of Pat Tillman, killed by a conspiracy within the armed forces, and also Studebaker, dedicated to the members, the fallen members of the military who died in Extortion 17. So people can go to abeldanger.org. You can support their work on Patreon as well. There are links on the site. Field, anything you'd like to leave us with before we wrap it up?
Well, first and foremost, the reason for this show was so Kevin and I could address any open questions about feelings from one to the other. I had no feelings whatsoever, but whatever he may have tweeted, it didn't mean a thing to me. So I'm glad that we've been able to come to an agreement that all three of us can work together. And I want to quote Kevin. He used the word monster. I would challenge everyone that hears this show, and specifically this statement, even though it seems unlikely, just trust me, everyone needs to go to YouTube and listen very carefully to the words of a song by Steppenwolf called Monster. It is the truest history of the creation of the United States as they separated from the evil in England. And one more soundbite, because I'm addicted to passing out sound bites, and somebody's addicted to interrupting me, so I'll just turn him off. Here's something that'll stimulate both of you gentlemen and all the listeners. What are the odds that on the very day that Donald Trump went over and told the Queen of England and Theresa May, the PM, Prime Minister of the UK, and the date, by the way, was Friday the 13th of July, what are the odds that on that very day, my wife, Denise, would get her long-sought visa to come back to the United States after we'd been, I'm going to use the term unlawfully separated for 19 months? Well, that leads us back to my sister. My sister and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton do not like my big mouth. Well, screw them. Come and shut it. Over to you, Jason.
Well said, Field. I love the sound bites, and I'm so pleased we were able to do this. I want to thank you both, Field McConnell and Kevin Shipp, for joining me today. I hope everyone will join Kevin and I tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Patreon, for the Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp. People should, of course, be checking out Able Danger. This has been an absolutely phenomenal session with you both. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'll be back at 5 p.m. with Charles Ortel as he closes in. Thanks for watching, everybody.